Hello and welcome to the online video lecture of Principle of Programming Language. Today we'll discuss about programming paradigm. So let's have a quick intro. I am Ashish Kumar Ratha. I belong to Computing and Security Department of School of Computer Science and Engineering, ILM University. I have about 17 plus years of experience and have several journals. So let's have a quick look to the content what we are going to discuss. So the topic name today is programming paradigm, and in this topic we'll learn about the approach of programmer towards programming environment. So normally we need to understand different programming paradigms such as imperative, object-oriented, functional and procedural paradigm. Apart from this, we also look into the event-driven and other programming paradigm as required. So let's have a in detail look on programming paradigm. So programming paradigm essentially it is a fundamental approach to writing computer programs. It normally defines a way of structuring your code, solving problems and thinking about how the program will run. If we take an example of finding a number from an array, suppose a problem has been given to you, find a number from an array of 10 such. So before writing the code, we need to first think about the procedure. What is the procedure? How we have to go, or what is the flow? Okay. So first we think of it taking an array. When taking an array, we need some memory, we need some data type. As it is a number, we need integer. We need to search, so we need to provide a compare statement, number checking statement, that is a if condition. So all these condition we need to be carry out before the coding. So that's why it has been the way of thinking about how to structure and design computer programs. So in this way of structuring, we find there are many different paradigms, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. In C, we code somehow different than in Java. And some language can even support multiple paradigms. If we consider a high level language, then we can get different aspect of that particular language on different environment or different paradigm. But in case of C, we can use that only in C compiler only, and that is a stand-alone language. Different programming paradigms have different approach to data control flow and program organization. So here we need to understand why different parameter is required. Why different parameter is required? Why this different paradigm is required? Suppose we have to build a house. Imagine you are building a house. You would use the same approach to build a skyscraper as you would a bungalow, right? Similarly, different approach tasks require different approaches. Some paradigms are better suited for specific problem. Okay. So instead of understanding different, in order to understanding different programming paradigms, so developer can take the help of right tools and techniques for a given problem. If we look into the different type of programming paradigm, we come across this, the content what we have. We come across the different programming paradigms. So first one is imperative programming. Please, what do you mean by imperative programming? As the meaning of imperative, what should be the programming language, or how should be the programming paradigm? Imperative means it is the important. If we see the literal meaning, giving an authorized command or of viral importance or crucial. So generally this programming paradigm describe how a program operates by specifying a sequence of steps. So this is a classic approach where the programmer gives step-by-step instruction to the computer, telling it exactly what to do and how to do. It's like a recipe with a list of instructions. Likewise, if you are buying a Maggi packet, in the back side of Maggi packet it is written how to cook. Nowadays some pictures are there. So that is, it gives you step-by-step instruction in form of images. If we consider the small subset of imperative programming, if we consider the different control structure, loop, conditions into a bulk of code, then it's become procedural programming. So procedural programming, a subparadigm of imperative, focuses on breaking down the program into procedures and functions that perform specific tasks. So the common language like C, Java, Python, all these are the way they are working. It is called uh, or they follow imperative programs. Next one is object-oriented programming. So as you already know the OOPS concept, the object-oriented programming, it works or revolves around the object. So to understand the object-oriented programming paradigm, you need to understand how an object, what is an object, and how its object is working. So I think you have already completed this object part in your previous semesters. Anyway, let's have a quick look to the object-oriented programming model. So we can say the object can be related to a real-time entity, a real-time object. Let's say the example of classroom. If classroom is an class, then each students are object. Let's take another example. A vehicle is a class. So each vehicle, it may be car, truck, they are known as uh, object in OOPS programming. Okay. So if we take car, so the car have its own characteristic, own data, and car behave its own behavior. If we take truck as an object, it has its own data and it has its own behavior. That's why it has been told that object have its own data and its own behavior. So we can say that the OOPS paradigm is such a paradigm where the memory pointer, everything revolves around objects which are self-contained entities. Object itself contains its own identity, own data, own functions on a class through a object or through a class definitions and instructions and how to manipulate the data. It's like creating blueprint for different part of a machine. Different part of a machine, each with its own purpose and functionalities. So if we are getting into the paradigm of OOP, so it has some features like encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism to organize code and promote reusability. So let's have a quick look on encapsulation. As the name suggested, encapsulation, capsule, so it's hide the data. Normally we use the data inside the member function, so it's we can access the data inside the member function and we use that member function outside the class, so our actual data is hidden. That is encapsulation. Then inheritance, when we create another class from an existing class, so the derived class must have some features of parent class, that is inheritance. Polymorphism, as the name suggested or as the name states, poly means more and morphe means form. When it is more than one form, the object, that is called polymorphism. You already completed this thing in OOPS. So if we take the OOPS programming, that is C++, Java, Python, these are supports OOPS programming concept. Then moving to the next is functional programming. So this programming paradigm, actually they are built by defining functions. So what is a functions? Functions are the block of code that can be executed when the function can be called inside the execution area. So it is about what the program should achieve rather than how it should be achieved. So functional programming means a block of code. We need to write the code inside a block and that block should be running to get the program output. So if we're taking a example of a mathematical problem, the functional programming paradigm come into existence. While we are using some functions, add functions, sum functions, average functions, we need to concentrate on what we are getting. We do not have to bother about how it's work, because we are using the functions. So it avoids state mutable data, focusing on immutable and pure functions. So normally the way we are using the function, it depends upon that. The language like Haskell, Scala, JavaScript embrace functional programming. So normally, um, most probably you have used JavaScript to design a web page in web programming, and in that you can recall the use of this functional program, because mostly we use functions in JavaScript. Then the procedural program. Procedural program, as I told you at the time of uh, explaining imperative, it is the sub-paradigm of imperative. So procedural program break down a program into collection of procedure and subroutines. It just break down the code into subroutines, and it follow a top-down approach. It's always top to down approach, the step-by-step procedure to solve a problem. So these are language like C, Pascal, Fortran. They normally follow this procedural programming concept. Next one is declarative. As the name suggested, declarative. What should it declare? It specify the desired outcome. It focuses on describing the desired outcome rather than specific instruction to get there. Okay? It tells the computer what it wants, not how to achieve it. So what it does actually, it asks the data what it required to the computer. So it tells the computer what it wants. उसको क्या चाहिए, that it tell, and ये process नहीं बताएगा. It not how to achieve it. It will not tell the process how to achieve it. Like writing a wish list. Then you specify what you want, but the method of obtaining it is, that is not the case in declarative programming. So if we check, it uses declarative language like SQL. So there are three different language command in SQL: prolog to express logic and constant. Then declarative programming reduce complexity and helps in automatic optimization. Obviously, as we are uh, giving command to get the data only, so it is obvious that it should reduce the complexity because it's automatically working on its own. Next one is event driven programming. So event driven programming is, it was something like that, we'll understand this with a example. Let's take example of Visual Basic. Before going to Visual Basic, I just want to tell you few things. Event driven programming mainly triggered or mainly operated by events. The events drive the program from starting to end. So if there is a button, okay, button means the area where we click, okay, when we click a button, something happen. So that clicking is an event, and the happening, that is the execution of that event. Okay, so we can say event driven programming, in short it is called EDP, is a programming paradigm where external events determine the flow of program execution. These events come in different shapes. Clicking a button, so an user can also click it. Okay, then another one is system event. System can automatically activate some inbuilt functions like finishing download, executing a batch file, message from an program. So I was giving the example of Visual Basic. Visual Basic is an IDE, integrated development environment, where it provides the event driven paradigm. Event driven paradigm means where we can add different component of windows like button, scroll bars, list, combo box, and we can give different event activities like clicking an button, okay, mouse over, we can give it like this. That's why VB is called as event driven programming, EDI, sorry, event driven programming, IDE. Next one is parallel programming. So as you have already have idea about different paradigms, so can you think what is a parallel programming? As the name suggests, it only focuses on running tasks concurrently. Parallelly, it will run tasks to improve performance and utilize multiple processors. So in computer science, we say this, it is the process of splitting. It is the process of splitting a problem into smaller tasks that can be executed at the same time in parallel using multiple computing resources. Or we can say that it can allow programmer to run large scale project that require speed and accuracy. So normally parallel programming, we use it in operating system. Of course we can do coding through different language. We can do this in operating system normally. So when we create a process inside the computer, it just break the process into smaller part and process one by one, or process parallelly several processes, several sub processes. So it can be explained like the process of decomposing a problem into smaller tasks that can be executed at the same time using multiple compute resources. That is known as parallel programming. So it is, as it is parallel, it is used in scientific computing data analysis where high performance or high data are required. At that time it is used, and we can use this in language like C, C++, Java. Using this language you can also do parallel programming. In C it is quite somehow it is lagging, but okay, we can do the small portions in C language. Moving to the next, logic programming. It is quite looping type of thing because logic is logic. So what should be the logic programming? It is a set of sentences in logical form representing knowledge about some problem domain. Okay, so logic programming is nothing but using our logic to program something. That's why it has been written. Logic programming uses formal logic to specify a set of facts and rules that govern the behavior of a program. As it is the logic, it must be automated, or it must be compiled or interpreted by the system as per the user input, user instructions. So it relies on automatic theorem proving, backtracking to solve problem. Then the language what we are using for this is Prolog and Datalog that are used for logic programming. Okay, and the conclusions at the last, we can say that the different programming paradigm can help us to get different way of executing program, different way of thinking. Okay, but here question arises, which paradigm to choose? There are different types of paradigm. So, which paradigm to choose? Which one is better? कौन सा बेहतर है? So to get this, we need to understand few things. Either it is a language, it is a logic, or it is a different processor. So the best paradigm for a project depends on the specific problem. We can see the different paradigm outline. So let's take the first one is OOPS. So as per the discussion till now, OOP is great for modeling real world object and complex system. Of course, because we are taking class and object is the instance of class, so that we can create it like that. Functional programming is good for problems that can be broken down into smaller functions, and for avoiding side effect means unintended changes in the data. When the object-oriented programming has been considered as the great, we can also consider the procedural programming, as it is the top-down approach, because it's executing one by one. Now, it is very useful for the small task and clear sequence of steps where sequence can be cleared up. The declarative programming is useful for problems where the desired outcome is well defined. So by understanding all these different paradigms, one can become more versatile programmer and choose the right approach for the job. Being a programmer, the type of paradigm chosen by the programmer has more uh, impact to get the goal of that particular program. For example, if we elaborate the object oriented part, for example, we are taking the encapsulation, inheritance, then we are getting different um, behavior of object depend upon our class. Okay, so imagine a car, and the car would be a class. So a car would be a blueprint that defined the properties. Now what is the properties of a car? Like the model, name of the car, or making, company. Now having functionalities, what is the functionalities? Like accelerate, brake, steering. It's common to all car. Each individual car you see on the road, that would be an instance of car class, a unique object with its specific value for these properties. This thing we need to consider if we are using OOPS paradigm. This thing we need to consider the what should be the object and how its behavior, and how an object behave as per the definition of object. Object is an instance of class. So classes are like templates. Classes are like templates who can define the characteristic and behavior of the object. They specify the properties. Here properties mean data types and methods means functions that object of class will have. Then apart from the different OOPS concept, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. Now what is the benefit of using a OOPS paradigm? The first one is modularity. Modularity means it breaks down complex program into smaller, reusable object, making code easier to understand. We can reuse the object several times. Then we can maintain it and we can modify it as per the requirement. Reusability of code that can be possible through the inheritance, because inherit the properties and methods, so we can uh, create that reusability function to use that object. Then data abstraction, I told you in previous class. Encapsulation protect data integrity, I told you. Then hides implementation detail, promoting cleaner and more maintainable code. And OOPS allow you to model real world entities and their relationships, making code more intuitive for complex system. Okay, so like way different paradigm are having different types of benefits. If we see a few about event driven programming, if we see a few about event driven programming, then it has some benefit like user interaction, because we have to uh, rely upon the events. Then we have to rely upon system events. Then we have to rely upon external message. Then sensors input. Then if we see the working culture of EDP, it purely depend on event. The event can be a loop. The event, when we click some part, the event handles, how the event handles, the callbacks. These things we can um, do. Okay. So in today's class, we have discussed different programming paradigm, such as imperative paradigm, declarative paradigm, functional paradigm, procedural paradigm, event-driven paradigm, etc. So as per your exams concern, the question will be comes like what is program paradigm and how different program paradigm can be used by user, or common programming paradigms. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can reach to me on the class. This is your second video lecture. Okay, thank you students, thanks for your patience.